everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror, the podcast. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner and operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, and welcome to this podcast in which we delve deep into the many different films that encompass the horror genre. Now, that means anything from the 1990s to the 1900s or the 1900s to today. We like to kind of delve into all the different decades of horror and the different genres and subgenres of horror so that you get a clearer picture of what's out there for you to enjoy, whether it is a independently produced horror film or a film that was produced by a major studio. So over the last year or so, we've been delving into a lot of different films. And one of the films that we are doing, or the film we are doing today, not one of the films, the film we are doing today is an actual Western horror, which we don't actually do that often because they're not made that often. But after we have this conversation about this film today, we're going to wish that they had made more of them. So today I have with me Sarah Panazzo, one of our special guests. Thank you for joining us today.
Get me off this. Oh, no.
She forgot her, her to say her intro, saying, "Hey, how you doing?" But
yeah, I think I froze a little bit, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. She was scared of the creatures in the movie we were talking about today, which is the Burrowers. See, I had to try to make it dramatic for you because if you've never heard of this movie, you're gonna have a new insight on it. Because I know a lot of people look at it and see, oh, Western. I'm definitely not gonna watch that. But it is a great film that has melded the Western genre with the horror genre. And I want to be able to tell people out there who are listening to the podcast that sometimes when filmmakers meld the two completely different genres together, you can get a gem. And this, in my opinion, is one of those gems. So let's get into the Burrowers. So, Panazzo, I have to ask, when did you see this film for the first time? Did you see it when it originally came out or more recently? Tell us a little bit about that.
So more recently, I definitely only watched this the first time like a week and a half ago, just for the podcast. My husband and I were very interested because after seeing Bone Tomahawk, all I want are more horror Westerns. And like Kevin said, there are not enough, but I don't know if this is quite what I was looking for.
Is that because of the monsters or just,
So it has a great premise. The monsters are really interesting and I wish they focused on it more, but it kind of takes a left turn into the horrors of man, which can also be horrific. But if you're going in for a monster movie, that was not what I was wanting in this. So I found it really dull until the monsters appeared and disappeared.
Oh, really? Okay. So
yes.
Two things about this movie is one, I love Western horror films. I don't think they get done enough. And two is I was familiar with the director, J.T. Petty. I've watched a lot of his films and he seems to be one of those directors who just kind of does random movies here and there. And they don't ever really, like you look at his oeuvre of films and he's just going to different areas of the horror genre, which is very interesting to me. For this film, it didn't have a cast of anyone that I was familiar with other than Clancy Brown, who I love because he's a great character actor and just about everything he's in. But other than that, for me, this was a movie when I originally saw it. I saw this movie when it originally was released because of it being directed by J.T. Petty. And I saw it when it was originally released. And because I love Westerns and I love the horror genre, it's funny to hear that you found it dull. And I actually loved most of the stuff up until the part where it really gets horrifying because of the fact that I love Westerns. So it's funny that you say something like that.
Yeah, because I felt like Bone Tomahawk really made me care and appreciate for these characters, whereas most of these people I just didn't like at all. They all had some very serious problems. Well, and like I said, it shows like the horrors of man, and they kind of needed an excuse to show these horrors. And honestly, the movie would have played out the exact same way, whether the monsters were really involved or not. But yeah, I felt like Bone Tomahawk was better written. I know that I'm a fan of this director, not for his directing skills, but for his writing skills, because I've played his Outlast games. And I know my husband has played the Splinter Cell games that he wrote as well. So he has some strong writing abilities, but I could not like these characters. I found myself just really bored throughout, except for when the monsters were there. Because like I said, genius idea. I wanted to see more of it. I think it could have been a bit better done if you were just focusing on a monster movie. But if you're okay with like Western drama with some monsters in there, I think you'll like the movie.
That's the thing. You are 100% correct, because what it is a Western. Until the monsters actually show up, it is a strict Western. You get the monster, little like story tidbits, but with or without those, it just is a Western for most of this movie. And the enemy to all the characters is the Native Americans. There is no mention of monsters until the last 30 minutes?
Like we know the monsters are there, but most of this movie, most of the cast has no idea that there's monsters, because over and over again, they're just like complaining about the Native Americans and, oh my God, just think what the Native Americans are doing to those women. It's so horrible. And then you think about how horrible it is just being paralyzed, buried underground, and horses are stepping on you. And it gets gnarly in that sense, and it's really dark, especially the ending. The ending is super dark, and it was not what I was expecting by the end of it, but I didn't know what else I would expect at the end of this.
We'll go through the whole movie, but I do have to say this about the ending. It didn't dawn on me till now, after I just rewatched it, because for everyone who has not seen the film, unfortunately, it's a very dreary and depressing ending, as you have the main character, Ferguson. I don't know his last name, but Ferguson. Coffee is the main guy, and he's kind of innocent. He is a guy who he's on this trek with a bunch of cowboys, looking for his girlfriend and 5 other survivors.
Hey, that's the love of his life, and he is there to rescue her.
He's there to rescue her in the love of his life, when her and a bunch of people are attacked in the middle of the night. They blame it on I think they actually blame it on the Indians, Native Americans.
Yes.
And they simply get a posse with some soldiers together to go after them. Now, unfortunately for them, the soldiers have a completely different attitude towards treatment towards Native Americans, because the one played brilliantly evil by Doug Hutchinson, who people will recognize from the X-Files.
I wanted to punch him in the face so many times.
Well, he's the guy you want to punch in the face in every movie he does, because he plays these despicable characters, and even though he's a despicable leader of these soldiers, he's the character who forces the other good, what we would call good, cowboys to venture off on their own without the protection of the soldiers and their mini guns. As despicable as he is, because he literally tortures a Native American for information that he will never get, because that person doesn't contain the information he wants. And our band of 5 people, led by Coffee and Clancy Brown's character and Will Parcher,
Mapother, or no, his character is Will Parcher. Yes.
Parcher. Okay, so
Parcher and Clay are the 2 leaders.
So Parcher and Clay, who are best friends, who've known each other for a long time, they add Coffee to their troop, and they separate from the soldiers because they don't like the inhumane ways in which the soldiers are treating Native Americans, and they believe that the soldiers are actually on the wrong track.
Which they are the entire time, because these guys would have never found the monsters if they stayed with that group.
So from then on, you're watching this Western of a posse going after Native Americans to avenge or find someone else. This is very much the exact same story of the Searchers and like 500,000 traditional Westerns. This is not a new story.
Yeah, it's not new at all. I mean, even Bone Tomahawk is the same, except instead of it being monsters, it's cannibals.
So that ideal is there for the whole movie, and as you're watching this group slowly encounter other people and other incidences, they slowly realize that something is not entirely right. Despite the fact they keep believing that it's Native Americans who are responsible for everything.
Like, they literally get attacked by the campfire and they're thinking it's Native Americans, and it's like, that does not look like any kind of person I have ever seen. It's
the only one. I think you're referring to the first time they do it, and Coffee's the only one who actually sees something, but it doesn't look like any type of Native American he's ever encountered before.
Yeah. They look like giant grasshoppers. The creature itself and the way that it's designed is really cool. The whole process of what it does to its victims is very dark. And I mean, that's the most horrific part. Well, that's the most horrific part of the entire movie, except for the realistic part, which is the ending, which is also super horrific.
So along this whole track, they slowly realize, or the monsters, the nature of the monsters is kind of like this. You're right. I didn't think about them looking like grasshoppers, but you're absolutely right.
Because the first time I saw it, I thought it was like more like a Wendigo or something. And then I was like, oh no, they're literally just giant grasshoppers with like these claw-like mandibles that like are razor sharp. They've got like scythe arms.
Yeah. Yeah, I did not think about that until now when you mentioned that. That's actually a great reference for these creatures. But the thing is, they don't really kill you as soon as they see you. They wound you, they infect you, and if you're not...
I wrote down step by step.
Oh, did you? Okay.
So they cut you in the throat, and they've got some kind of like venom that paralyzes you slowly if you've got a little bit, or it can be instantaneous, which we see happen with Dobie and some of the other victims, but the slowly part happens with Parcher.
Yeah, Parcher.
And they vomit on the wound so it heals, so you're still being like sealed up and alive. And then they cauterize it. Small white things start entering the neck. And then while you are paralyzed, they drag you off and bury you. They wait until your body is soft enough to eat on the inside, because they must not have very sharp teeth. And then they will eat you slowly.
That is it. That is really a cruel way to eat your food. But I do know that there are certain like animals out there in real life that do that, like snakes. Snakes do something very similar to that, or certain species of snakes.
Spiders do that. I mean, yeah, there's certain species that are, venomous. Their bite is venomous. And they do that a lot. And then I love the whole like prehistory of, well, they used to feed on the buffalo and we never noticed it, but now all the buffalo are gone because of you damn white people. And all I could think of for half of this movie is the Pocahontas meme of these white men are dangerous. And I was like, this is just the whole thing, like, white people are the worst.
They are, well, because And point of fact is there's only one African American, and he's the cook in this movie.
It's that, and then you've got the Irishmen who around the same time, like, you have the whole like slavery with them two building railroads and everything like that, which a lot of people forget how bad the Irish were treated. But then you've also got the Native Americans and how they turn the one set of Native Americans against the other, and they're like, no, we're gonna pay you, so you're gonna be with us. And you're going to rat out all the other ones. And like, he tried to, I couldn't tell if he just couldn't understand the other tribe or if he was literally lying just to get them killed so he could be pushed up.
I got that impression too. I was like, is he deliberately lying? I'm thinking he was probably deliberately lying because he adds to the torture of the others in America. So... and it's really harsh.
Yeah. Like I said, there was like no cheerable person in this movie. I mean, even Dobie seems to be taking advantage of the poor paralyzed girl he's trying to transport back. And I was like, man, everyone here sucks.
Yeah. Up until that point, he was a decent guy. Then he tried to take advantage of her.
Yeah, like Coffee, I think, was the only one who was okay, but then he doesn't know how to shoot a gun, and he's the one who shot the cook in the leg. And I was like, God, you all fucking suck.
Well, he was supposed to be the innocent one, so
Man, like I said, I had so much trouble with this movie. I wanted to see monsters, and I got some great monsters, but not enough of it, and not necessarily enough of the right kind.
Yes. Well, that being said, because it is a slow burn. Because
It very much so.
you don't think John and you don't think Will are very bad people until much later on, because of the choices that they make. And then of course John gets his head bashed in by a Native American after being wounded, which is unfortunate. But
Yeah, I mean, I love Clancy Brown, and I was so disappointed that he was gone already. But like Will Parcher, like the first thing he says, he's literally on a date with this woman and her son, and he brags about hanging 3 men from the tree that they're eating under. And I'm like, my guy, that is not how you woo a woman.
maybe it was back then, but then again,
That's a weird type of woman. I don't want to know that.
then by the end of the film, you see exactly what's happened to people he thought were innocent.
Yes.
It's an odd journey that they go on, and to be honest with you, they're just tracking the monsters as the monsters are tracking them because they don't realize that they're tracking monsters.
Mm-hmm. They just find these prairie dog holes constantly, and like the first one the horse steps into, they do that slow reveal of it being somebody's rib cage that he stepped on, and it's just like, ugh.
It's and of course the first time, and you mentioned the one young kid. What was his name again?
Dobie.
Dobie. The woman that they find where he pulls her hair out first and then realizes she's been buried.
And then they're like, what is that scratching sound? And I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, it's inside her. It's scratching open their necks and laying eggs, because that's what I'm so used to with chest bursters. And turns out she's so paralyzed, it's just her single toe that's able to move inside a boot. And it's just like, I know you're paralyzed, and they're just kind of stuck there. At least they're like buried enough, because can you imagine them just laying there with their eyes staring at the sun?
Oh.
Like, there are so many horrific things about being paralyzed and buried alive. Like, it was one of my worst fears growing up. I was a weird child. But, like, it's just horrific. Because in that case, like that was one of my favorite but least favorite Stephen King novels. Was a guy got bitten by a snake, and they thought he was dead, but he was so paralyzed, they do a full autopsy on him.
Oh.
And it is horrific. And I mean, like, people who are paralyzed like that, like sometimes you can't tell because your heart slows down, especially back then. And it's just the things that can happen while you're paralyzed.
Oh, well, and that's one of the big things about this movie, because they paralyze all the creatures, the Burrowers, because throughout the whole movie, our group of people think that the Burrowers is just another Native American tribe.
Because they called them like the miners or something. And he was like, no, like burrow, like he did the animal version of it. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Well, the whole concept behind these creatures that live underground and just come out at night to feast and attack and eat and feast and do all that type of stuff, who have been living on the prairie and the whole the western. I don't want to say
they're in North Dakota. They're in the Dakota territories during this, so like they're in the prairie.
Yeah. So it's always for me. It's always interesting to see when filmmakers come up with new creatures and new mythologies that kind of add to our love of monster films. I don't think there's enough of them out there. Yeah. There's really just monster-sized sharks and alligators and stuff like that. But when someone decides to come up with something new like this, I always take a look at it. But you bring up a good point, is they don't show up for a very large portion of the movie until close towards the end. And you're like, if you know about the movie and you're kind of waiting, you're kind of...
like I said, if you're going in waiting for the monster movie, it is not the monster movie you are expecting. And I would love to see a sequel of this focused more on the monsters instead of the cruelty of man. Because these monsters are genius. Like I said, they look great. Their kills are super interesting. And just their whole history, the whole third generation thing, I was like, okay, so we've got like a Jeepers Creepers thing going on. Okay.
I
But
don't.
like,
Yeah.
but like, I would totally watch a sequel to this that focused more on the monsters and what happens, and them actually like going down to the brood of it or such.
Yeah, because we never saw anything underground. We just saw
No.
them above ground. So there's a whole other world that we don't even know about or have ever seen in this
Yeah.
movie.
And I know this movie was worked over a process of years. I think they said that they designed the creatures or redesigned the creatures across 3 years before they finalized what they had.
Hmm.
And I can only imagine, like, if somebody lovingly took this into their hands, like J.T. Petty just writes the script and they get some, like, really good monster makers.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see an extension of this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways they can go with something like this.
Yeah. And I mean, they can do something modern with it. They can do a before or after. I mean, 3 generations doesn't necessarily have to be a lot. So,
Yeah, they could just write it out of hat, just kind of ignore a lot of stuff like that, like they did in the Jeepers Creepers Reborn movie.
well, I mean, like 50 years can be 3 generations nowadays. I mean, it was back then too. So, like, you can realistically do another Western like this slightly later. But no, I thought the monster was genius. Like I said, I would love to see more of it.
Well, just to give a little bit more background about the story, there comes a turning point in the film when Will decides to use his other companions for bait for the Native Americans. They believe that by setting the fire and by waiting out in the bush, the Native Americans are just going to attack at night because they've been attacked at night before. When Will realizes that he made an error and that the Burrowers come after him, that's when he gets wounded.
Yes, that is the big turning point of the movie, and it was probably one of my favorite scenes because it kept reminding me of It Comes at Night. Just the way it was shot. It was just beautifully shot at night. Like normally you get that like blue hue so you can see everything, and this was like filming into darkness, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. That's another great movie for It Comes at Night. I love that one. That's a great watch. I love that movie too. That's it. But up until that point, we kind of like Will. But when he uses his friends for bait, and then he gets wounded, and then of course we all know by then the infection starts to slowly have his mental abilities deteriorate.
Oh my God. He had some of the best lines during that. And that's what I was going to say with that, with my opening quote. So there was John Clade piss on us from heaven and get me off this horse. My ass feels like soggy bread.
That's right. Because they made a comment earlier in the film that he could sleep on the horse, and he literally is sleeping on the horse.
Yes. Which is great. And then he's just kind of stuck on the horse.
It just dawned on me that with Will using them as bait, of course they have their comeuppance when Will becomes bait for the creatures. Will and his group end up meeting a good Native American in the form of
I think they're the Ute.
Ute.
Or I think that's what it was.
I'm not sure what if she was a Ute or not.
I don't think she was, but she gets them to the Ute essentially.
Oh, that's right, because the Ute were speaking French to them and not what they understood from her.
Yes.
That's right. So Faith has more or less saved her family by killing, I think she kills her father.
She kills her husband. And that's where we learn a lot of the history about like them coming every 3 generations and them feeding on the buffalo and everything like that, which was really good storytelling and progressing the story along, which makes her ending that much more distressing. But at the same time, the beginning, they kept mentioning how one of the families, it looks like the father had killed the daughters. which was essentially the same thing that she had done to her husband.
Yep.
So there's a lot of mercy killing because it's almost like, okay, well, will they not feed on you, or is it better to be dead while this is all happening?
Yeah, I got the impression that these burrowers like to feed on their people that are still alive.
Yeah.
Rotting. That's how I see it. So, but Faith does get them to the Ute, and of course the Ute see Will, who is already infected, and he's a goner. They realize he's a goner. So the best way to get rid of the burrowers is to set a trap for him. And I thought this was really interesting. I think the first time I saw this, I didn't pick up on the conversation. Now it's like it's just old hat. I was like, oh yeah, they're going to use Will for bait. They're going to get the burrowers because the burrowers have been feeding on them as well, and they want their own revenge. We don't know why, but we know that every third generation, I guess, that they try and flee the territory of these burrowers. Only because an earlier sequence had a Native American on a horse trying to flee. I think that's the one that the soldiers end up capturing, right?
I think so, because I think they said that like they left the Great Plains because that's where they had taken over, and they just kept moving. But then you run into the civilized folk taking over, who then kill all the buffalo there.
Yeah. So
it's really just they kept running to escape, and it's like Stephen King. The gunslinger walked off into the desert, and the man in black followed. Like, it's such a constant thing in horror, which I really love. Is they will constantly follow you at no matter what speed Michael Myers walks at, he will catch up.
That is exactly what this is. But the thing is, having it be where not just the burrowers being forced out of their normal life by the white man, the Native Americans are being forced out. And when the Native Americans, the Ute, I think, makes the comment that it's good that the burrowers like white men too.
Yes. I was laughing so hard when he said that. I was like, that's fantastic.
The white man is finally getting their comeuppance for intruding on territory that didn't belong to them. Because you kind of get the impression that if the white man hadn't killed the buffalo and impeded on anything, that nature would have set itself right always.
Yes.
The Native Americans would have never had to entangle themselves with the burrowers, and the burrowers could just keep feeding on cattle.
Yeah, because realistically, the burrows would have only come like every 50 years, and they might have had like a year of low buffalo counts, and then it would have been 50 years of clean living. So it's really interesting, like I said, how it could play out. And like, okay, well, if they find one of the buffalo that is like paralyzed and they eat it, are they going to end up paralyzed as well? And that's why they know about the burrowers. Like I said, I would love to see an extension of that story, especially because when you get to this ending with them trapping the burrowers, using the body as bait while he's still alive, I didn't know what I was expecting, and I only kind of put two and two together after the fight started that they had poisoned him. But then they just wake up and come back. So basically the poison just slows them. It doesn't kill them, and they have to physically maim every single one of them. Or as we saw, when the sun starts rising, they're like vampires.
Yeah,
I guess they burrow underground, so that makes sense. Like mole men, you're always seeing that they're blind, so yeah, like they're going to hear you more than they're going to see you. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't quite what I was expecting, but it makes sense.
These creatures that only come out at night, who can be killed by sunlight and feed off the soft parts of whatever their kill is. It didn't have to be humans, but humans were here after they killed off all the buffalo, so that became the new meal. Because
they're vampiric grasshoppers.
Yes, vampiric grasshoppers.
It's really weird until you watch the movie, but it makes a lot of sense.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because there is myth built into it by the Native American story. It's kind of like you said earlier about the Wendigo story. The stuff makes sense if you have a myth based around it.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things that makes these creatures interesting and gives them a richer background and history. And it works for a Western story. And I think when you have those typical Westerns about, and we keep saying this, but the white man impeding on Native American culture, this parallel between the white man impeding onto Native American culture, which is also impeding on the Burrowers culture, and then this is like a big conflict. It's sad that that for the white men in the film, there is no difference between the Native Americans and the Burrowers to them. They're one and the same. But to the Native Americans, thank God the Burrowers like white meat.
Yeah.
Because, the Native Americans have known about these creatures forever. They have a name, they know where they come out, they have a history. But the white man's been naive to the world around them. They only, so. But Will's unfortunate fate is live bait, who was also poisoned by the Native American, the Ute.
Which, at least he's dead and he's not suffering anymore, but it was a violent way to go.
He was still alive when they was eating his innards and soft parts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we get to see that up close and personal. And unfortunately for the naive, Coffee.
Yes.
He shoots I think he shoots both of them, actually.
I know he shoots a couple guys in one of the standoffs, but while he's aiming for one the first time, he widely swings and hits Callahan in the legs. So Callahan can't do anything, and that's why he's stuck behind with Faith. And I can't remember who the other person was who was with him at that point. I know it was another Native American, maybe one of the Ute.
It was the Ute. That's who Coffee leaves behind to go get help. I don't remember either one of their names. I
don't even think they had names.
Names. They were just two people who are probably. Well, I will not say probably. They were definitely out to try and capture or kill the Burrowers, because they've already got traps in this whole sequence.
And they're in the same exact location as them, as if they were tracking them as well.
Mm-hmm. So they had their own reason to be out there, and they've already have all the spears ready and all that type of stuff to make sure that they're dead. They just happened upon a really good bait, is what happens with Will. And it's violent. This last act of the movie is violent. I mean, you see Will gets eaten up and his arm gets pulled off.
Yeah, there's the whole bear trap thing. Bear traps alone is bad around your legs, and then starting to use them as weapons is genius. It's one of my favorite bits.
Yeah. Oh my God. I keep, for some reason I kept thinking that something else happened when I originally saw this, but thankfully I rewatched it, because I forgot about the whole bear trap thing, that he falls into a bear trap because he's naive and he's not as knowledgeable and experienced as anyone else. Kind of like the Patrick Wilson character in Bone Tomahawk.
Yes.
You have to have that naive type character who learns as he goes. And so you get that whole thing here, so that he goes through hell and back in order to save his girlfriend, which, by the way, we need to mention why he stops that. One of the Ute drops a totem with a bunch of charms on it.
Yeah.
And he sees the charm that he gave to his girl at the very, very beginning of the movie. And at that point, he now knows that she is no longer alive. Now, I don't think the audience realizes it wasn't the Ute who probably killed her until after we learned that the two Ute are actually trying to kill the Burrowers, that they probably just came across her. And
it might have been that they used her as bait if she was surviving, and if she wasn't, it was just let's collect what they've got. Nobody else is using it.
Yeah.
So,
which they also make a comment on when they find the wagon.
The wagon of who takes the men, but none of the materials.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of great little parallels and stuff in this film. I don't think I noticed a lot of this until I rewatched it. But it makes it, like you said, a very dreary and depressing film, because now we can actually get to what's so depressing about the film, which is the ending. Because after Coffee has finally understood what the Ute were trying to do, and he spears all of the burrowers after a good little battle sequence between him and a couple of them.
And then the sun rises, and the rest of them like burn, and it's like great. And he's like, "Cool, I'm gonna go get help." And he finds his hat, and he's so excited. Meanwhile, you see Dobie's eye just like shifting, like, "Oh my God, he's still there." And then he manages to make it back to the military, who have already found his friends.
Unfortunately, it's also the soldier played by Doug Hutchinson again.
Yes.
Who is full of himself like he was at the very beginning, and thinks that all Native Americans are bad unless they're on his payroll. And they've already hung the Ute and Faith for no other reason other than being Native Americans, despite the fact that they're two different tribes. There.
Yeah, doesn't matter to them.
It doesn't matter to him. And of course, they say to amputate the leg off of
Callahan. And he died of shock. And it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you kind of get the impression that he just wanted to kill Callahan for leaving him.
Well, it wasn't even that. He was mad at him earlier for feeding his prisoner.
Yeah.
And Callahan was like, I believe in everybody still being able to eat. And like, then they make the comment about scouts looking out for the rest of the Ute so they can kill all of them too. And it's like, God damn.
So you come across the end of this film and you realize that Coffee is like really depressed. He's gone to hell and back.
He's literally the only one left.
It was a little. What year did this come out?
It was 2008.
So unfortunately, when I rewatched this film, and I did not have this impression when I originally watched this film, when I rewatched this film, that entire end sequence reminded me of the ending of Night of the Living Dead 1990, when the Barbara character goes back to the barn, and and this is before she actually goes back to the barn, but she sees the hanging corpses that people are just shooting at because they won't die. And of course, you have this idea that all these rednecks are just as evil as the zombies are. And you got Doug Hutchinson in this film, who is evil because he's just treating all Native Americans the exact same.
Well, and that's the same way that the original Night of the Living Dead ended, is they were like, oh, well, he's black. It's okay. We killed him.
Yeah. And it's like, and I didn't see that until I rewatched it. It's like, crap, dude, this is really freaking depressing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was waiting for Coffee to pull out a gun and shoot him, just like Barbara pulls out a gun to shoot the one character who survives the house, but was hiding in the attic. I can't remember. Cooper. I was like, damn, this is so depressing.
It's so bad, but I'm glad that I know that real life is sometimes the best horror. I know that Jordan Peele likes to say that a lot. Like, there's a very thin line between comedy and horror, and that's why he loves to do horror as well as comedy. And commenting on social issues without fully being outright with social issues. Mm-hmm. I can really appreciate and love when it's pulled off correctly. Like I said, this movie was a little heavy-handed with it, and it's real depressing for a monster movie.
I think it's because of the Western aspects. Because
it leans more on the Western horror than horror Western.
Yeah. Yep. And the thing is, there are a lot of conventions for Westerns that everyone already knows and are aware of, and it takes those and adds the horror bit to it. But like you pointed out, that horror elements don't come until 2/3 of the way into the film.
Well, and that can be a good and a bad thing. Like we said, we keep comparing it to Bone Tomahawk. We said the exact same thing for that. Because that also didn't really seem it seemed more like a Western, and you got this comedy of people getting to know each other and whatever else. It's a dark comedy, and then you get into the real horror at the end of it. And there's a lot of movies that pull that off successfully. This one I just felt was a little bit longer, but like we said, if you like Westerns, it is 100% a Western.
I also will think that with Bone Tomahawk, you got time to get to know each of the characters.
Yes.
A lot more. With this film, you don't necessarily get to know.
No, not at all. You learn little bits, and then it's like they're just a trope of that kind of character. There's nothing else expanding on them.
Yeah. I will agree with you on that. So, any other words about this film in particular?
Like I said, my my last note on this movie was white people are the worst monster. And I have the Pocahontas meme on my notes. But yeah, that's all I could think of during this movie. And like I said, if they were to come out with a sequel that was pure monster movie, I would 100% be in. But it leans a lot heavier on the Western archetypes than it does the horror.
Yeah. I'll agree with you on that. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. I think the most memorable thing will be the monster when they finally show it. This is not like Jeepers Creepers, where the monster is pretty much from the very beginning to the end, and you just learn little bits about it as the movie goes along. This is pretty much, you don't learn much of anything until the monsters show up, or when you get the history of what they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is I still really enjoyed this film because I love Westerns. I do believe that anyone who does not like Westerns, this will not be one that you should gravitate to. If you don't like Westerns, but you want to watch a Western horror, Bone Tomahawk is a great example of a great one.
I did get a couple of references of another movie to watch based on watching this one. It's called Dead Birds, which came out in 2004. So I haven't seen that one. So that one's now on my list. But yeah, unfortunately, there are not a lot of Western horrors or well done Western horrors.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be very interested to see a lot more of that.
All right. So
which is what we say every time.
We'll have to make a deep dive on. Actually, Dead Birds is on our list to do. But
okay.
You probably didn't know what it was when you saw the name.
Nope.
I forget who asked about Dead Birds, but I really enjoyed Dead Birds, and I haven't seen that one in a long time either. But for me, I think that anytime a horror filmmaker or a filmmaker decides to meld two different genres, he's fighting against himself in regards to which genre to focus more on. Sometimes it works out in their favor, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, we can all.
Well, it's all based on what the production company wants too. Like, sometimes they want more slaughter party than they want a Western, because there aren't a lot of Westerns released right now either.
Nope. Western's a hard genre. I mean, when you can think of the few, remeld them a lot, but like space horror does not do very well most of the time. It does not, with the exception of the Alien franchise, space horror doesn't do a whole lot of business. People want their sci-fi to be sci-fi and their horror to be horror. So it's hard, but I always commend people who try it, because I'd rather have these type of other films out there than not have them at all. So I will implore anyone, if you're just curious, to check out The Burrowers. I've always enjoyed it, and I'm also a fan of J.T. Petty, so make sure to check out his other films. He's got some really interesting ones that we'll hopefully get to on the show.
Otherwise, like I said, his video game Outlast is a great horror video game to play. It is terrifying, and it is not one of those Resident Evils where you can like pick up a weapon. It is a run and hide game, which makes it so much worse because there is nothing you can do. But it's got some great story. For those gamers out there, I do recommend it.
All right, so for everyone out there listening, we now like to say our what we give the film in terms of stars, from 1 to 5, 1 being bad to 5 being an Oscar-worthy piece of film. Where in the spectrum do you place The Burrowers?
I hate it, but I give it a 1. I hate giving out 1s, but it's literally one of those movies where, like, I will watch the monster bits, but I don't think I will watch the rest of this movie ever again.
No, it's fair. It's fair. It's fair. Like I said, I like Westerns, so I kind of probably I'm much more kind to the film. And I've always loved the monsters in this film, and despite the fact that I've only seen the movie 2 times now. I don't get around to watching very many movies that often, but this is one of the movies I put on the list for our show because I just didn't think enough people had seen it. Now, I absolutely had no idea if the movie was successful or if the movie
so it was released at Toronto International Film Festival and then was sent direct to DVD after that.
Okay.
But it was 2007 when all that happened, so it wasn't necessarily the greatest time for horror anyways. We were in the remakes and sequels and prequels and trequels and whatever else we had around then. So this wasn't necessarily a big thing. It's like with Bone Tomahawk, there wasn't really an international release for that one either the couple years after. So yeah, it's Western horror really doesn't get put out there very often.
You wonder why anyone would give them the money to make it, but I'm glad they do sometimes.
Yeah.
For me, I'm going to give the film 3 stars. I've always enjoyed this film, not just because of the creatures, but also because I'm a huge Western fan. I do believe that there are some issues. It's not nearly as epic as Bone Tomahawk. We both had that great discussion on Bone Tomahawk. So if you have not heard of the movie Bone Tomahawk or have not listened to our podcast on there, I think that is one of the first ones we released.
Yeah, I think it's like the second episode we did.
Go back and look at our episode for Bone Tomahawk. But I do want you to check this out if you have never seen or heard of J.T. Petty. He is a filmmaker who has done some really interesting horror films. I want to thank you, Panazzo, for joining us on Conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome. We always love it when you're around. You like to take a chance on a lot of the crazy movies that I put on the list.
Hey, I will watch anything, and you have opened my eyes to some great movies that I had never even heard of, so I am 100% here for it. I will always broaden my horizons.
Well, thank you. From everyone here at Something Wicked Entertainment, we hope that you've enjoyed this podcast. If you have, make sure to check out some of the other episodes that we've done, such as the one on Bone Tomahawk. Also, make sure to go to your favorite podcast app, Spotify or YouTube, to watch our episodes, which are released regularly every Wednesday at 8 a.m. From all of us here at Something Wicked Entertainment and Events, have a pleasant day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.